Friday, November 11th, meet authors Loren Spears and Robert Geake for a special Veterans Day book signing of From Slaves to Soldiers. 3 p.m. at Tomaquag Museum, 390A Summit Street in Exeter, Rhode Island. This episode of Indigenous Lifeways is sponsored in part by the Mohegan Tribe.
That's the banner of the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, with the anchor prominently displayed and the word hope, which would become the symbol of the state of Rhode Island after it had entered statehood. And this is General James Mitchell Varnum. Now, Varnum became the commander of the Kentish Guards after Nathaniel Greene was rejected by his own troops because he had a disability. He hobbled a bit on one leg that was a little shorter than the other. And this was, according to his own men, at first not fitting for a commander to be hobbling in front of his troops. And they rejected him, and Varnum himself almost resigned because he was such a good friend of Greene, but Greene persuaded him to stay, and he became the commander. He was assigned to the Rhode Island Militia in January 1777. Became the 1st Rhode Island Regiment of the Continental Line. And Christopher Greene was then named commander. James Mitchell Varnum became the Brigadier General of what became known as Varnum's Brigade, which consisted of the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, along with the 2nd Rhode Island Regiment and the 4th and 8th Connecticut Regiments. The following year, 1778, under Colonel Greene's leadership, the Rhode Island Regiment participated in the successful defense of Red Bank. And they had a number of battles that we'll get into throughout the war, but what I want to talk about first is the way that the manumitted slaves became part of the regiment. After the regiment had been in existence for a time, there were very few people to fill those regiments. People would sign up for a short amount of time. They would serve. In Rhode Island, it was mostly guarding around the coastline. And so men would be called up. They would serve for the portions of the year, maybe the spring into the fall. They would go home in the winter and wait to be called up again after the winter was over. In 1777, Varnum wrote to General Washington that the 2 battalions in the state of Rhode Island were very small, and as there was a necessity of furnishing the battalions with additional troops, he thought it was a good idea to condense them into one regiment at that time, and this was done. He then put a novel idea, or what was then thought of as a novel idea, forward to the commander-in-chief, and that was that rather than just a few blacks, and these were free blacks at the time, but rather than just a few blacks, he thought that there were enough black people in the state to make an entire regiment of black soldiers. Now, Varnum has received a lot of attention for this. This is his house in East Greenwich. It's carefully preserved, very beautiful house. And on the house is a plaque acknowledging his role in what they call the 1st Black Regiment. But you may as well also give a plaque to Lord Dunmore, and for that matter to the King of Spain, because in the 1700s these failing empires in their struggle to maintain control of colonies, used slaves repeatedly to bolster their defenses and bolster their offenses into these territories. And in fact, in 1733, the King of Spain had declared an edict that any slaves who wanted to leave the Carolinas and make their way to St. Augustine in Florida, which was Spanish territory, were welcome to come to Florida and join a militia that would then attack the Carolinas. And in fact, the state of Georgia, and think of this in the context of even our own, the last century, the state of Georgia was founded as an all-white barrier between Florida and the Carolinas to prevent so many slaves from trickling through and going to St. Augustine, and also to prevent those same slaves from coming back and attacking the plantations in Carolinas.
Support this and other great podcast content at our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/artways. Tomaquag Arts programs are sponsored by the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. Investment in arts and culture. Music presented by Eagle and Hawk. www.eagleandhawk.com.